Good morning. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of AKP Sports Talk. That's Ari. I'm Creo. We already know what we're doing here. It's March. We are literally 2 days away from having the 2022 2023 March Madness bracket for our disposal, and we're just going to get to it. We're going to take one quick look at the bubble. This is, I believe, as of this morning. I don't know if you can scroll up, Ari. I don't know if Lenardi
Yeah,
did this morning or not.
yeah, he did.
And so this is literally as of literally 30 minutes ago. This is 30 minutes ago. So we look at the bubble right now. It's a first look, and we look at the last four buys, and the four teams in there are Boise State, Providence, Penn State, and Mississippi State. I agree with those four. I feel like Penn State, beating Illinois in their first game in the Big Ten tournament yesterday was a big win for them, and they were around the last four in phase, and I feel like them getting that big win, elevated them. And then Boise State, they were up big against UNLV. UNLV stormed back. They made it a close game. They had to force overtime, but Boise State held on for the win. And I feel like Boise State should be a tournament team. And then for Providence, wow, you talk about a team that's been slipping. I think they're in, but they're not a lock. I feel like after a bad loss yesterday to a UConn team, and this team's been kind of trending in the wrong direction recently. I would be very weary on the Friars to really do any big moves. March Madness, I think maybe a 9 or 10 would be for them. And then Mississippi State, I feel like they definitely got a big win. I feel like definitely beating Florida, even though yes, it was a very close game, and Florida had many chances at the end to win that game. Definitely. Definitely a big win for them in their program. So I feel like they were in, and they were already one of the last teams in coming into that game yesterday. And I feel like, at this point, it's not about, record against win and who. It's all about wins and losses, right? And if you win, you're in. And if you lose, you're out. And, Ari, just quickly looking at, the last four buys, I don't know if you've seen any of these four teams play or got to see any of them play yesterday, since I believe all four of them did play yesterday. If you got to see any of these four teams play, did you get to see any of them? And on top of that, did you like any of their play yesterday? Even though Providence had a bad loss, they stormed back in that game. And then, Penn State, keeping it close with Illinois before going on that ending run to win the game. And then, Mississippi State playing a close game against Florida. And then Boise State, being up by almost 20 and then almost choking it at the end, but still getting the win.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call Providence a bad loss because, they were like a 6-point underdog to begin with, so they were not expected to win, obviously. But like you said, the last month and a half, they've really, really taken a fall. They went from at one point, middle of the season, they looked like they could be like as high as like a 3 or 4 seed, kind of in that range. And now, like you said, probably closer to like a 9 or 10, just given how they ended the season so poorly. Boise State had the overtime win, like you said, over UNLV. Shout out Shane Noel, Seattle high school product, hit the game-tying shot to send it to overtime for UNLV. And then Boise State, handled business in overtime. Penn State had they beat Illinois, right? So they had that big win. And Mississippi State, they play Alabama today. But I think even, like you said, even if they lose that game, which they probably will, they should be in. So, I'm cool with all four of these teams where they're at.
Yeah, you mentioned Providence as well. The ceiling for Providence was so high, literally a month ago when, they were atop of the Big East and, probably sitting at a 3 or 4, but, just having some bad losses down the stretch. And in terms of bad losses, not like losses to bad teams, just bad losses to good teams. I mean, being down by almost 20 or 30 at one point to UConn or, whoever it was, it's not a good look for the NCAA selection committee. So, being around one of those last four buys, I feel like is right, unfortunately, for this Providence team that was so high earlier in the season. We look at the last four in now. Top of that is Rutgers. They're playing literally right now as we speak. They just tipped off against Purdue. They got a big win yesterday against Michigan in a game where it was, okay, whoever loses is probably going to be out of the tournament. Rutgers was down super big early, but they stormed back to get the win, and now they're playing Purdue right now, and that game just tipped off. And that was definitely a big win for Rutgers, who has been kind of falling, onto the bubble. After they lost one of their defensive guys, I forgot who it was. Defensive presence inside. I know they lost him. I think I want to say mid-February for the season, and that was one of the big reasons as to why this Rutgers team was so good defensively. But that's a big loss there. But you know what? They got a big win against a good Michigan team. They came back and they knew they needed to win that game in order to kind of save their chances in the NCAA tournament. And I feel like they're one of the last teams in. I feel like they should be in. A win, obviously, today would be a lock for them. But I feel like if they don't lose by any more than 20, then I feel like they should be in as maybe one of the final teams in. Pittsburgh, wow. I mean, they were safely in a day ago when they beat Georgia Tech in their first game of the ACC tournament. But yesterday they got beat down by Duke. They couldn't find shots. That Duke perimeter 3 defense is one of the best in the country, and they definitely got to Pitt. So Pitt is now falling into one of the last teams in after a bad loss. And, it sucks for some of these teams like Pitt and, Pitt, like on the outside, like teams like Oklahoma State, Nevada, Wisconsin, those teams that already lost, and they physically cannot do anything until Selection Sunday. So for now, Pitt, they just have to sit and wait and hopefully – have no bid stealers in any other league, so they don't get forced out of the tournament. And then Utah State, I feel like they had a big win last night against a New Mexico squad that was kind of fighting for their shot, but Utah State's offense was just too much for them. Utah State moves into the bubble, replacing Nevada, who had a bad loss to San Jose State in the quarterfinals in the Mountain West. And now Nevada, I feel like Nevada has a solid chance, but they need some prayers answered right now. Maybe with Arizona State losing, Rutgers hopefully getting blown out by them, or Oklahoma State, obviously they're out. Clemson, they need to lose. So there's just a lot of hoping for a Nevada team on the outside. But for Utah State, I feel like they've been playing themselves in. They won 6 in a row. They're playing some of their best basketball and really just playing great, honestly. And I feel like that's a scary thing right now for a team that's been playing with momentum now, finally entering in the tournament. And then finally, we have Arizona State. This team has always kind of been near the outside. One of the final teams in was Nevada, but Nevada lost and ASU won. So I feel like, it's just right for Arizona to be in. ASU, obviously, they beat USC last night in a game where they pretty much needed to win in order to kind of save their tournament hopes. They got to really hope that there's no bid stealers, because obviously, this is a personal game for you. They play the Wildcats tonight in round 3, and we all know what happened last time these two teams met with the game-winning buzzer beater by Desmond Cambridge. So who knows what can happen tonight in the Pac-12 semis. But Ari, we look at the last 4 teams in. How vulnerable would you say a team like, Pittsburgh is right now? They can't really do anything to strengthen their resume anymore compared to the 3 other teams, and Rutgers, who's playing right now, currently have a 7-2 lead against Purdue. And then, Utah State, who plays later tonight in the semis, and then Arizona State, who plays later tonight in the semis. What do you like do you like this last 4 in? What do you like? What do you not like? What do you like? What are your thoughts on the last 4 in right here?
Yeah, I mean, ASU is deserving, obviously, after they really crushed USC last night. USC made a couple of runs in the second half to cut to single digits, but for the most part, ASU controlled the whole game. Like you said, Rutgers had the big win over Michigan. That was the do-or-die game for them, for their tournament hopes at that point, so that was big. Then Utah State, they got their win over New Mexico, and they have a big game against Boise State coming up tonight, so that could really solidify them if they can win that game. Pitt, obviously you would like to see them have a closer game against Duke. Like, you expected them to lose, but not by not by like almost 30 like it was. So yeah, you have a few teams that will get to, in the first 4 out that could work their way in if they get another win or two. So yeah, Pittsburgh's definitely kind of just at this point hoping that those teams right behind them, fall at this point, because like you said, their regular season and conference tournament is done, obviously. So they have no way to better their own resume. So they just have to hope that the teams right behind them can, so to speak, make their resume worse, or however you want to say it.
Yeah, I mean, for Pitt, they're just in kind of the vulnerable state. They just got to hope and pray, things go their way in terms of no bid stealers and, maybe hoping a team like Clemson loses today and such that I definitely feel as if Utah State and Boise State is going to be one of the better games of the day just in terms of, what they're fighting for. I feel like Boise State should be in even if they lose today. But Utah State, I feel like they're not in a must win, but I feel like they definitely should win in order to be a little more comfortable. So it's one of those games where both teams can't really afford a loss, but they're playing each other, so something has to give. You mentioned ASU, right? And how they've been playing they've been on the bubble almost all season, and I feel like they've played some of their best basketball down the stretch recently. Yeah, they have a big game tonight, obviously, against your Arizona Wildcats. And then Rutgers, obviously, right now, I feel like they're feeding off of that momentum from yesterday. They're up 12-4 right now against Purdue. So, it's early, but, who knows, potentially, if that's a big upset in the Big Ten tournament, then I feel like Rutgers would have to move up, which could move maybe a team like Clemson up, or maybe a team like, if Providence, since they can't really do anything, maybe they fall, or who knows what happens depending on all of the games today. But I definitely agree with you there. I feel like these are definitely some of the last 4 teams in. I definitely would say these are the last 4 teams in terms of how they played on the season. And now we look at the first 4 out. And the first 4 teams out, the first team out right now is Oklahoma State. They had not a bad loss, but they lost to Texas yesterday in their second game in the Big 12 tournament. And after getting a big win against Oklahoma, a game where they could not afford to lose, because if they lost that game, then they would have been out completely. But, they definitely got the win there, and, a good win followed by not a great loss, but a loss in itself, puts them in the first 4 out. And, they're one of those teams that's vulnerable because they can't really do anything either. They just have to sit and wait. So, for Oklahoma State and the Pokes, it's going to be an interesting selection Sunday for them. Then you have Clemson, who has a great opportunity to play themselves into the tournament today with the matchup against Virginia. I feel like, if they could definitely beat Virginia in the semis of the ACC tournament, I feel like that would definitely give them a bigger edge for them to be a tournament team. Then Nevada, obviously they had a bad loss yesterday to San Jose State. They couldn't shoot the ball, pretty much kept San Jose State in this game all of the time. And, shout out to the Spartans. They had a big win for their program, their first Mountain West tournament win ever. So that was a great story for the San Jose Spartans. But, Nevada, and, they've been one of the better teams in terms of shooting the ball from 3. And, it's tough to see I've always been a big supporter of the Mountain West this year, but, that dream of 4 maybe turning to 3, and then that dream of 3 could turn into 2 depending on what happens in between Boise State and Utah State. And then finally Wisconsin. And I don't think Wisconsin is, I feel like Wisconsin is a tier lower. I feel like in terms of you want to put them in tiers, I would say, the last 4 buys are definitely a tier. The last 4 in are a tier. I'd say Clemson at the top, and then Oklahoma State, then Nevada, then everyone else. Because Wisconsin is going to the NIT. They lost in the first round. Chucky Hepburn couldn't shoot. They needed to win that game. They couldn't afford to lose. They lost. Ari, you look at the first 4 teams out. Do you see any chances for one of those 4 teams to potentially be in the tournament by Selection Sunday? Or do you think with 3 of these 4 teams not even having any more chances to play, is it kind of wraps for the first 4 out here?
Yeah, I mean, Wisconsin, to be real, the only reason why they're still even in that bubble is because of their name and the conference they're in. Like, to me, for a while ago, they weren't even in consideration to me. Like you said, the Clemson, they had a statement win over NC State the other day. And so, for sure they can play their way in with the win over Virginia. And if their offense can stay hot, they definitely have a chance in that game. But I mean, yeah, they're the only team really that I can see getting in because, like we said, the other three are out of the conference tournament, so they have no way to better their resume. So I don't really, you have like a team like Pitt that's obviously out too in the last four in, but they can't make the resume worse since they're out. And then when you can't have someone that can get better, I'm not too sure. Obviously, this is just Lunardi's projection, so it doesn't mean everything, obviously. But I mean, yeah, Oklahoma State's probably has the second best chance because Nevada was just with that loss. I think that just put the nail in the coffin, so to speak, for their chances. And Wisconsin, again, but I think has been out for a while. So, yeah, obviously Clemson has the best chance being at that they're still alive, and we'll see if they can pull off the win over Virginia. And I think at that point they could overtake a team like Pittsburgh, in that last four in, based on these teams and based on this bubble.
Yeah, when you look at the teams that are looking at, and obviously we're as already said, like this is just Joe Lunardi's bracket. There are plenty of other bracketologists and people who've created bracketology brackets that probably have different teams in and different teams out. But in terms of what I would say, I would definitely agree with Lunardi's right here. I definitely say that I feel like in terms of the last four buys, last four, and I feel like those are accurate. Well, just because of what happened yesterday. And then as well as the first four out. I agree with you. I feel like Wisconsin is simply there just because they're a Big Ten school, and the Big Ten is one of the better conferences in terms of whole totality. But the Big Ten is kind of turning into the Pac-12. It just beat themselves up, and that's really kind of a reason as to why Wisconsin is looking in the first four out because of all those bad losses in the conference and ending it with an Ohio State loss in the first round of the Big Ten tournament. I feel like Wisconsin, they're out and they already kind of know it. They're probably going to go to the NIT along with the other teams on the next four out here. North Carolina, they lost to Virginia. I feel like they are 100% going to the NIT because that was a game they needed to win in order to kind of save their chances. Oregon, I feel like their only big chance of getting an at-large bid is really winning the whole Pac-12 tournament. And they escaped Wazoo yesterday after they stormed back. But they got to play UCLA today. And, even though UCLA does not have Jalen Clark, the Bruins are still a good team. And they know how to win. They know how to play close and win good basketball games with, Jaime Jaquez and, Tiger Campbell. I don't know if Oregon can, really beat that. Especially I believe they split the season series. I don't remember. And then Vanderbilt, I feel like they're the same way. All they really need to do is just win the SEC tournament. But that's a harder ask than to do. So Vanderbilt, they have a lot more work to do. But who knows? Maybe if they're in the SEC championship on Sunday morning, who knows? Maybe they can be in the discussion. And then Michigan, they're out. We're not even going to talk about that. Ari, any other comments about the next four out in that range?
No, yeah. Oregon and Vanderbilt, I think, have to win their conference tournaments to get in. So they know what they have to do, and we'll see if either of them can pull it off.
Yeah, I believe Vanderbilt plays later today, and then Oregon, obviously, as I mentioned, they play in the semis against UCLA. And Vanderbilt, I believe. I'm like, who does Vanderbilt play? Kentucky. That's right. Vanderbilt plays Kentucky, and obviously those two teams just played in Rupp Arena, where Vanderbilt stunned the Wildcats on the road. So that would be a good, fun matchup. But other than that, I kind of agree with you. Oregon and Vanderbilt are kind of the only two teams in that next four out region that have a shot at the tournament. But they have to go run the table and win their conference tournaments. So I definitely agree with you there. Now we're going to take a look into the full field of 68. We already talked about some of those last four teams in, and first four teams out. We're gonna look at the Midwest region and see what Lenardi has in style. So his number one overall seed is Kansas. The Jayhawks have 16, I believe, quad one wins. Just an amazing season for Bill Self. I believe Bill Self is actually not coaching the rest of the not NCAA Big 12 tournament due to some going sickness. Maybe, who knows? Maybe that will play a role. Kansas, they had a close game with West Virginia until it got to like maybe 4 or 3 minutes when the Jayhawks ran away with it. But it's not over. Nothing is set. They got to play Iowa State, who just beat a good Baylor team. So who knows? That could be interesting. We have the 8-9 matchup of Florida Atlantic and USC. We have a 5-12 matchup of Miami and Drake, Indiana Yale, St. Mary's versus the first four winner of ASU and Utah State. That's a fun matchup. Tennessee Furman. We have Northwestern and Providence as the 10, and then Arizona as the 2 versus UNC Asheville as the 15. Ari, you look at the Midwest region right now. What do you, as we head closer to Selection Sunday, what do you like from this bracketology version right now in terms of the Midwest region held in Kansas City?
Yeah, obviously Kansas number one. There's some kind of fun, kind of 4, 5, 6s, and Indiana and Miami and St. Mary's I think could be fun to watch. I think in Miami, Indiana in the round 32 would be a fun game. We talked about Providence probably being a 9-10. That's what they are here in the 10 seed against Northwestern, number 7 seed. Yeah, I think Miami's a team that I think has surprised a lot of people, in the ACC. And when a guy like Isaiah Wong gets hot, I think that they can beat pretty much any team. So I think I could see them making a run, and that could be a fun Sweet 16 against Kansas potentially if those two teams were to meet. And Tennessee losing to Guy Ziegler, obviously a huge loss. They're able to win their first game without him, but we'll see how that affects them moving on into the NCAA tournament, obviously. I think St. Mary's could definitely be a tough team offensively for Tennessee. Losing Ziegler if those two teams were to meet in the round of 32. But yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at some of the matchups here, a Miami-Drake matchup, that would be a great matchup with two good backcourts. That would be fun. You mentioned Tennessee and Furman. Those are two completely opposite teams. You have Tennessee, who, a team that's very prideful in their defensive play. Obviously, they lost to Kai Ziegler. They beat who did they beat yesterday? I know they beat Ole Miss. That's right. They beat Ole Miss yesterday, but it wasn't close. No, actually, it was close, but Tennessee ran away with it near the end. But now potentially say they match up with a team like Furman, who is one of the better shooting teams in the country. They can shoot well from three. They play with pace. That could be a really big 14-3 upset right there in the works. We see Providence down all the way at a 10. They were like as high as a 5 at one point in the season, but just losses in the conference, losing by maybe 20 or 30 or being down by that at that point, definitely plays a role. You mentioned Miami and how Isaiah Wong and how that backcourt of Miami is, and if they get hot, they're one of the best backcourts in the country, and they're definitely a team Kansas does not want to face. That would be a great backcourt matchup with Wilson and Grady Dick versus Wong, and I forgot who's second in command for Isaiah Wong. I forgot his name, but yeah, that would be. This is definitely an interesting region, to say the least. Right now, I definitely can say Kansas is definitely a Final Four candidate out of this region, just because of how many quad wins they have, and they know how to win games. Once you get to the Sweet 16, it's pretty much all about coaching experience, right? And right now, I see Bill Self in there. You see Tommy Lloyd. You see Mike Woodson. You have some great names in this region, and I feel like this is going to be a fun region. If this is obviously this would be a fun region, but we don't know until Sunday. But right now, I definitely can see I can definitely see Arizona making it to the Final Four. If they
I definitely think that like this side, if this is it, I think it is pretty favorable for Arizona to at least make it to the Elite Eight because, like I said, Tennessee losing Ziegler is big, and then I think that they could obviously beat Northwestern or Providence, and then Tennessee or St. Mary's if that's who they play. So I feel like this is an easier route to the Elite Eight for Arizona than it is for Kansas having to go through potentially Miami or Indiana in the Sweet 16.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel. I feel like the bottom part of the region is a lot easier than the top half of the region in the Midwest right now. But this obviously just 2 days before Selection Sunday. Who knows what's going to be the real field of 68? But now we move on from the Midwest. We're going to take a look across the board into the South region. This is all the Elite Eight in Louisville. The number one seed is Alabama. No surprise there, even though they've been playing a little bit vulnerable as of recently. The Crimson Tide still have one of the best offenses in the country. Brandon Miller, household name already. He can score. He's a great scorer. He is the Alabama Crimson Tide offense, even with his off the court issues. And, he's been dealing with that very professionally. I still feel like he's definitely one of the best players in basketball right now at the young age. And then we have Iowa and West Virginia. We have TCU and VCU, Virginia and Iona, San Diego State and Mississippi State, Marquette, UC Irvine, Texas A&M, NC State, and then Purdue as a 2 seed facing off against 15-seeded Kennesaw State. Ari, first reactions as we look at the final bracketology heading into Selection Sunday from the South region. What do you like? What do you don't like? What are your thoughts?
TCU is kind of an interesting team because they just lost Eddie Lampkin, the center, who is stepping away from the team for reasons with the coach, is what I heard. I'm not entirely sure. But they had a statement win over Kansas State yesterday, and they have a rematch against Texas, which should be a good game today. So they're kind of an interesting team where they're just like super inconsistent, but when they're at their best, they can beat anybody. So I think that could be an interesting second round matchup if they were to face off against Virginia, and then potentially Alabama in the Sweet 16 if that were to happen. Marquette, we've talked about, is a 3 seed that could definitely make a run to the Elite Eight, potentially even get out to the Final Four. When their offense is on, they're pretty much unstoppable. So that would be a fun, potentially it would be Elite Eight if they were to face against Alabama in that. So, and then it would be Purdue potentially in the Sweet 16. So that would be a pretty tough run for Marquette having to go through. It would be San Diego State probably, and then Purdue, and then potentially Alabama. So that could be a tough draw for them, having to go through all three of those teams. But yeah, it's interesting that Purdue is at a 2 here, but when they were a 1 seed, for at least the last month or so for most bracketologies. Virginia a 4. Also, we know that they're vulnerable just with their offense and how they can struggle to even put up 55, 60, in the game. So facing a team like TCU could be tough in the second round for them. But yes, this seems like a pretty open region in terms of a number of teams that could make a run to the Elite Eight Final Four out of this South region.
Yeah, I definitely feel like this is a lot more wide open. You mentioned TCU, and the big question is which TCU team we're going to get. Is it the team that can really beat a team like K-State and, make a deep run, or is it the team that's going to, struggle against like Oklahoma State or whatever? And that's all about health for that TCU team. You mentioned Eddie Lampkin, who's going to be away from the team for a little bit due to some personal reasons. So, who knows how long his extent will be out for. We go back a little bit up, Ari. I want to talk about some of the matchups real quick. Yeah, don't worry. No, don't worry about it. You see Virginia. You talk about Virginia, right? And the one thing that always plagues Virginia is the fact that their scoring offense is not great, but they have one of the best scoring defenses. And what that means is, they limit the amount of points opposing teams score on them. And Virginia, as you mentioned, they barely allow maybe 50 to 55 points a game. But at the same time, they're only shooting they're only getting like 55, 60 points a game as well. So a team like TCU could definitely be a really, really bad matchup for Virginia, just in terms of pace and scoring ability. You mentioned Marquette and how they're one of the best scoring offenses in the country, but they got to play against San Diego State, a defensive team, and then maybe play Purdue, who has a size matchup inside with Edey, and that'll be first game whoever gets the 90 wins that game. But that'd be a fun game to watch as well. You see this region. And when you talk about Purdue as a two, I think bracketologists, or I guess people who are making the seed lines, are kind of anticipating that UCLA is going to win the Pac-12, and I feel like that would be a great case for them to be a number one seed as well, as the last number one seed. I feel like Purdue is a little vulnerable at a one seed, a little more vulnerable as a one, but I feel like a two would definitely not be bad for them. And plus, they're already kind of losing right now to Rutgers, so I feel like Lardy is already writing the script for us right now. Purdue being a two because they're losing to Rutgers right now, but that even if Purdue wins, I still feel like they definitely would. I feel like Purdue kind of has to win it's kind of weird. Purdue has to win the Big Ten tournament to be a number one. I mean, that's just kind of how, I guess, lackluster there is in terms of a concise top four in basketball right now. But very wide open region. I definitely agree with you. Some teams are definitely a lot more trendy than others. Maybe Iowa, if they can get their act together and start playing some team basketball. They just lost to Ohio State. Mississippi State could maybe upset San Diego State in terms of play, but I don't really see any great huge upsets in the first round in that region. But we go down to the East region, which is in New York, and Houston's the number one seed overall here. Obviously, the Houston Cougars, one of the more dominant teams in the American Athletic Conference. 29-2 this year. They have a great backcourt of Marcus Sasser. He's definitely their lead guy. And I think I forgot who the other guy was. Jamal Shed, the guy who hit the game-winning shot against Memphis last Sunday on Memphis at their place on Senior Day. This Houston team, even with close competition like a team like Memphis, they definitely can find a way to win, and they're a national title contender just because of how well they play on both sides of the court. In terms of how their offense is definitely one of the better offenses in the country, led by Sasser, and then their defense, is always going to be one of the best. And then we have a 8-9 matchup of Arkansas and Illinois. We have a 5-12 matchup of Duke and Oral Roberts. Wow, what a matchup that would be. We have Kansas State and Toledo. We have Kentucky as the 6th versus Penn State, UConn, Vermont, Michigan State, Auburn, and then Baylor and Colgate. Ari, once again, another region here. What do you like? What do you not like? What are your thoughts on this East region? Final bracketology heading into Selection Sunday.
Yeah, I think it was last week we talked about Arkansas and the team that's really been disappointing compared to expectations, but when they're healthy, they're really, really capable, and they're kind of getting healthier now. We saw them have a big win the other day against Auburn, and now they play Texas A&M today, so they're kind of starting to gain some momentum. So they're a team that, we talked about Houston before and how their defense is arguably the best in the country, but their offense is what can make them vulnerable. And so against a team like Arkansas, if they were to meet up in the round of 32, could be a potential 8-1 upset there. Like you said, Duke or Roberts would be a fun first-round matchup between those two teams. And even Kansas State Toledo could be a good game as well. And then going down, Michigan State, Baylor potentially could be interesting in the second round. UConn's kind of been a team that's kind of been up and down, but they've kind of been hitting their stride as of late as a 3 seed here. But Houston, there's a lot of teams that we've been talking about that are number 1 seeds that have their clear flaws and everything. And Houston, like we said, is their offense. And so, let's say they did scoop by Arkansas in the second round. Then a team like Duke, who has been playing their best ball as of late, heading into whatever the last month of the regular season into the conference tournament, into the NCAA tournament. That could be a fun game between Duke and Houston. It would be in the Sweet 16. So yeah, a lot of interesting matchups in the first round, and then potentially second round, Sweet 16 and on in this East region.
Yeah, I feel like the first round matchup, the best matchup of the first round in that region is Duke Oral Roberts. I feel like you have two really contrasting teams. You have Oral Roberts, who loves to push the pace. They're one of the best 3-point shooting teams. They're one of the best offensive teams, versus Duke, who has one of the best perimeter defenses for the three. Can outscore. They have Filipkowski. I feel like you have two really contrasting teams, and I feel like literally either one of them could go to the Sweet 16, whether it's Oral Roberts or Duke. I feel like if that's the matchup that it is, I feel like either one of those two teams could make it to the Sweet 16. You also mentioned K-State, Toledo. Those are two different teams. Toledo, obviously, they love to play a little more defensive, and then you talk about K-State and the story of Keontae Johnson and how he has kind of revolutionized this K-State team along with Jerome Tang, the head coach. He's a national head coach of the year candidate, just rejuvenating the K-State franchise, right? The K-State program out of the mud from the conference. UConn has a good shot as well. The Huskies have been playing some good basketball as well. They have a top 10 defense, I think top 10 offense, top 12 defense. And for all you March Madness connoisseurs like myself, obviously the ongoing trend with the past every single national champion, I believe since I think the data collecting era or whenever it started, every national champion has been in the top 40 in KenPom for adjusted offense, and then top 20 for adjusted defense. And UConn is a perfect example of that. Top 10 in offense, Sonogo, and then their defense, Dan Hurley, they play very defensive. And, in this region, I can see them going to the Elite Eight. I really could. All they have to do is get past Kentucky, and that'd be a great matchup inside with Sonogo versus Toshibwe. That'd be a really fun matchup. But I still feel like this UConn team can make it to the Elite Eight if they get past Kentucky, because say they have to play, Baylor, and I feel like they can shut down Baylor's offense the way Baylor's been presenting, but Baylor's been playing recently. So I feel like out of that bottom region, UConn is definitely a favorite to make it to the Elite Eight. You go up top here, and as long as Houston can survive Arkansas, because Houston, they may have a problem with Arkansas. Arkansas definitely is a sleeper team. I feel like they can make a deep run. And you mentioned it. When they're healthy and when they're playing together, they're one of the best teams in basketball. They play great team basketball when they're healthy. They had a big win, as you mentioned, yesterday against a good Auburn team. Now they got to play A&M, the second best team in the conference. I feel that's going to be one of the best games of the night. And then you mentioned whoever comes out of that Duke Oral Roberts matchup, that'd be fun to see in the Sweet 16. Whether it is Duke or Oral Roberts, but I still have Houston winning this conference, winning this region right now, just because of the experience once you get to the Sweet 16. Kelvin Sampson, he's been there in back-to-back seasons. When he was a 5 seed last year, they went to the Elite Eight. The year before that, went all the way to the Final Four. And this Houston team has experience, so I feel like Houston will definitely be a number 1 seed and maybe actually may reach the Final Four this year, depending on what region they get into. And then heading into the final region, the last number 1 seed is UCLA. Lenardi thinks that the Bruins will win the Pac-12 tournament with a win today against Oregon, and then potentially whoever comes out of the Territorial Cup round 3. UCLA, obviously, one of the more dominant teams on the year. In terms of their defense, they have one of the better defenses in the country. They love to force turnovers, get in the lanes, use that fast break offense to kind of boost their momentum on offense. So I feel like UCLA is dangerous if you just keep forcing turnovers. And then you have Maryland and Memphis. We have Iowa State and Charleston. That's an upset, right? That's an upset written right there. Xavier, Utah Valley. We have Creighton versus the 11 matchup of Rutgers and Pittsburgh. Gonzaga, Louisiana. Missouri, Boise State, and Texas and Montana State. Are you looking to this final region here? What do you like? What do you not like? Who are your favorites as we head into the final days of bracketology into Selection Sunday? What do you like about this final West region? Excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at potential second round matchup of Creighton and Gonzaga would be a really fun game to watch. Gonzaga has obviously been heating up the past month and a half or so. Capped off with them nearly doubling St. Mary's in the championship of that conference. So they're obviously a team that could make it to the Final Four, depending on what region they land in. You got Xavier just barely squeaked by DePaul the other day in that conference tournament. Like you said, Charleston is going to be they're probably going to be a super trendy, whether they're 11 or 12, whatever seed they are, upset in the first round. And Iowa State had the big win. They beat Baylor, I believe. And so, they're a team when they're on, they're really good, but they've just been inconsistent, like pretty much every team in the country this season. So that could be an interesting first round matchup. Again, like you said, UCLA number 1, Texas here number 2. That could be a fun, potentially Sweet 16. Texas and Gonzaga would be a fun game to watch. And then potentially UCLA and maybe Xavier in the Sweet 16 and on that top half of the West region here. And then potentially, UCLA versus a rematch of UCLA and Gonzaga would be a really fun game if that were to happen in the Elite Eight. I feel like a lot of exciting matchups that could potentially happen all over this West region.
You look at this West region, I think this is one of the more fun regions, right? We see obviously number 1 UCLA, and the assumption for UCLA is, they kind of have to win the Pac-12 conference tournament. Not saying they won't, obviously, as the number 1 seed. Obviously, that's a little more, a little more of an advantage. At the same time, UCLA, they did just lose Jalen Clark, so that could definitely play a big role into seeing how they can potentially see if they continue to go on to the Pac-12 tournament and win. Obviously, if they damn it, I feel like that they have to be the number 1 seed just because they did it without Jalen Clark. And, they had a close game yesterday against Colorado at first. But, even though the score doesn't say it, it was very, very close for, I want to say, about most of the way, maybe 36, 37 minutes. Charleston, look, I'm a big believer in the Charleston team. And the only reason I say that is because their 3 losses this year have become to the number 1 team at the time in UNC. At UNC by 16. Okay, they lost to UNC on the road when UNC was the best team in the country by 16. They had 2 conference losses and those 2 conference losses, they shot 15 and 20% from 3. So you scratch out the fact that they had 1 bad loss to a really good UNC team at the time. They haven't lost to anyone bad. They have 3 losses on the season. They shoot the ball well. They force turnovers. If they get hot and they can go on a run, it's dangerous. And they love to shoot from 3. So I feel like a Charleston Xavier matchup in the second round would be a lot fun to watch. First team to 80 wins that game. Same for Creighton Gonzaga, honestly. I mean, Creighton Gonzaga, though that's the best second round matchup in this region, potentially. I mean, Creighton, in terms of how they play right now, I feel like they're a sleeper team. And then Gonzaga as well. I mean, people have not been talking about the Zags, obviously, just because of how, they always have high expectations and, they kind of choke when it really matters or get close to the national title in terms of the Elite Eight, Final Four. Once they get to those kind of rounds, they always choke. But I feel like this year they're not being talked about as much just because, they've kind of struggled, I guess to say, in conference play with, a bad loss to LMU. But I feel like that loss is redacted after they beat them by 50 on the road. They beat St. Mary's 2 out of 3 times. The last 2 times, the most recent, beating them at home and then beating them in the championship game by almost 30. And I feel like Gonzaga has been really hitting their stride. Number 1 scoring offense in the country. that's a team you need to watch out for as well. I feel like whoever wins that Creighton-Gonzaga matchup, that'd be a fun matchup to see against Texas. I feel like whoever can come out of that region or that little region of the bracket, I feel like whoever comes out of there will be a great matchup for Texas, obviously, and how they play great offensively with Sir Jabari Rice and Timmy Allen and Marcus Carr. They're 3 shooters and 3 scorers consistently. That'd be a very scary trio to face if you're Creighton or Gonzaga. And then Gonzaga, obviously, they literally played this Texas team earlier in the season, so that'd be a nice rematch of what happened earlier this season. But in terms of my favorites out of this region, it's hard for me to go against. It's hard for me to go against UCLA right now, just in terms of how they're playing. But without Jalen Clark, I don't think they can make it. My teams are definitely Creighton, Gonzaga, and maybe even Texas. I feel like Texas has always been a dark horse national title contender just because of how they play on both sides of the ball. And even without Chris Beard, they definitely have bonded together kind of over that and, have led this team to, and now a semifinal appearance in the Big 12 tournament with a matchup against TCU later tonight. So right now I definitely would say Creighton is a Final Four candidate out of this region. Gonzaga, pretty much whoever wins that second round matchup, and then Texas. UCLA can. It just depends on who they match up with, because if they're matching with like a Gonzaga team, I don't know if they can do it in terms of stopping Gonzaga's offense all night. And then same for Creighton, but Texas maybe. But this is definitely one of my favorite regions just because of all the talent that's in there that no one is really talking about in terms of Charleston. Creighton obviously gets recognition, but obviously they're going to be a 5 or 6 seed. So, not a lot of people are going to be picking them to go deep in the tournament and stuff like that. Or Gonzaga, which everyone has their doubts on. Or Texas, who lost in the first round last year. So it'll definitely be interesting to see, who comes out of that region, if that is the region. Definitely a very exciting region. I would definitely say out of all the other regions that we've taken a look at early in this final bracketology of Selection Sunday. And Ari, I don't know about you, but I think we covered a lot of college basketball in this episode. I think that's going to do it for me. Next week, obviously, it's going to be a little interesting because we're both going to be in Arizona at the same time. It's going to be something that we've never really had the opportunity to do before, so we may even do one together. We'll see. But Monday, obviously, is going to be a busy day for us. I will be traveling, and Ari will be traveling as well, so Monday will not be a good day for us. But next week, Sunday, we'll find a day to record. If not, then we will come back after you with a little bit of a debrief of what's going on in terms of NFL free agency, what kicks off on Monday, whatever happens in the first round of the NCAA tournament, whatever happens in the WBC in terms of, who wins the pool games and who makes it out. So much sports going on. Obviously, who can make it a close race for the playoffs in the NBA. So much going on right now. Ari, do you have anything else you want to say real quick?
No, yeah, we're up in the air for recording next week, but we'll try to find a time if we can. If not, then the following week we'll get back into our regular routine.
Exactly. So we appreciate you guys for sticking around. Thank you guys. We love all the support. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, comment. We'll see you guys soon, but enjoy the weekend. Get your brackets ready because it's March Madness. It's already here. That's all right. I'm Korea. We will see you guys soon. Have a good weekend, guys.